Today is May 29th, 2023. I want to talk about the situation here in Southeast Asia. I want to talk about the US-backed opposition getting into power here in Thailand following the recent general elections and how they are now openly vowing to adopt US foreign policy objectives as their own, starting with the ongoing conflict in neighboring Myanmar. There's ongoing violent conflict between the ousted U.S. client regime headed by Aung San Suu Kyi and the central government backed by Myanmar's military. Thailand had been neutral on this up until now, as neutral as they could be, but this is all changing. So we have this article from the Irrawaddy, which is funded by the U.S. government through the National Endowment for Democracy. Almost all English language media from Myanmar or about Myanmar is funded by the U.S. government. And the headline is, Thailand will no longer be quiet on Myanmar incoming coalition. And this is from May 25th, 2023. Now, just even making comments about another nation's internal political affairs is bad enough. And this is because under the UN Charter, under international law, you are supposed to stay out of another nation's internal political affairs. So this is the UN's official website. They're talking about the UN Charter and this particular section where it says the Charter prohibits the threat or use of force and calls on all members to respect the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence of other states. And Thailand is certainly not doing this, not by making comments about Myanmar's internal political affairs, and certainly not by adopting the foreign policy that I'm going to talk about here in just a moment. In addition to violating international law, the incoming US-backed client regime taking power here in Thailand, they're also violating the core principles of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN. If you go to their official website right here and you scroll down to fundamental principles, they list them all, and it's all about the primacy of national sovereignty. It says non-interference in the internal affairs of one another. It also says the settlement of differences or disputes by peaceful manners. And this is the exact opposite of the policy that the incoming US-backed government here in Thailand plans on taking. Now let's get back to this Irrawaddy article and Thailand no longer being quiet on Myanmar. It says, Foudy Pitsuwan, Foreign Affairs Chief for Move Forward Party leader Pita Limchalun Lat, said the incoming government will revive Thai foreign policy to improve its image in ASEAN and alleviate Myanmar's political crisis. Under international law and the fundamental principles of ASEAN, you are not able to do that. You're prohibited from doing that. Stay out of Myanmar's internal political affairs. It goes on and it says, Move Forward Party is forming an 8-party coalition after winning the largest number of seats in the country's May 14 general election. So this is, the US has helped the opposition in Thailand build themselves up as a political power. The US has also funded media here in Thailand to control the information space, not to mention that Thai social media takes place entirely on US-based networks like Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. It says, Harvard-educated Foudy, who is the son of former Thai Foreign Minister Surin Pitsuwan, said that Thailand will move away from the current government's quiet diplomacy in dealing with the crisis in Myanmar. The outgoing military-backed Prayut Chan-o-cha administration has been criticized for being too friendly with the junta, or in other words, upholding international law and the fundamentals principles of ASEAN, which say do not interfere in another nation's internal political affairs. It also says that he added, under the new government, Thailand will rebalance its foreign policy to restore its reputation in the international arena. And by whenever they say international arena or international community, they mean with white Western nations and white Western nations alone. And then it explains that it's essentially says under the Prayut government, Bangkok foreign policy leaned away from Western countries and more towards China. So they admit it. And then finally, it says Foudy studied at Harvard and graduated from Georgetown University with a degree in foreign service. Now, do you think that curriculum taught Foudy Pitsuwan about foreign service in regards to a Thai perspective, a Southeast Asian perspective, an Asian perspective, or even a Eurasian perspective? No, obviously it taught him foreign services from an Anglo-American perspective, which is why predictably he and this Western-backed opposition he is a part of, they are going to literally adopt US foreign policy objectives. Not even theirs that are similar. They're just going to adopt and support US initiatives regarding Myanmar. That's what they get into here next. Very obviously, it says, Move Forward Party leader Pita Limchalenlat revealed his Myanmar policy at a post-election press conference on May 15th, saying, we want to push ahead and make sure the 5-point consensus is actually achieved. Pita highlighted the importance of the Burma Act. Who came up with the Burma Act? Whose legislation is that? Is that Thai legislation? Is that Myanmar's legislation? Let's find out. Let's read. It says, which he said Thailand would use to start working with the international community to make sure that we have the right amount of pressure and incentives for people to resolve their conflict. And again, this use of the word international community refers to white Western nations only. And then it explains what the Burma Act is. It says, passed by U.S. Congress last December, the Burma Act authorizes U.S. funding of non-lethal support for resistance forces in Myanmar. And by resistance forces in Myanmar, they mean armed militants who have been killing people across the entire country, including through blatant terrorism, attacking civilians deliberately, killing people who have nothing to do with the police or the military. And I've covered this for the last 2 years. There's articles like this from Myanmar Now, another US government-funded media outlet right here. I had to find the archived version because they deleted it because of it. It's so incriminating. And they're talking about these terrorist attacks. They killed security on the train because they've been attacking the trains. And if you go down and search for Red Cross, it says, according to Lai Pie-wan, who's one of these militants, one of these terrorists, he says that means that anyone in uniform who continues to work for the junta, including traffic, police, firefighters, and even Red Cross workers, is fair game. And if you've been following the news closely in Myanmar, as I have, you will know that all of these people, and also teachers and everyone else, they have been targeted and killed by these terrorists. And this is who, under the U.S. Congress Burma Act, will be receiving non-lethal aid. And that's always the first step on the way toward arming them openly and then eventually backing them militarily. That's who the U.S. has been backing in Myanmar, and now openly through the Burma Act is authorizing U.S. funding to provide them non-lethal support. And that's the policy that the incoming U.S.-backed client regime taking power in Thailand, that is the act that they will uphold. They're not even going to come up with their own act. They're just going to implement the United States' act. Very rarely is it this transparent, where a US-backed client regime gets into power and so transparently flips foreign policy 180 degrees against the interests of the people of Thailand or the people in this region, Southeast Asia, and so explicitly adopt US foreign policy objectives. In this case, implementing a piece of US legislation created regarding a region on the other side of the planet from Washington. These aren't just terrorists trying to get the US client regime back into power. The entire US involvement in Southeast Asia is about encircling and containing China. So this opposition has also attacked Chinese people and Chinese investments, and also joint Chinese-Myanmar infrastructure projects. Again, from the Irrawaddy, this was just earlier this month, Myanmar resistance groups claims attack on Chinese pipeline facility. This pipeline is part of the Belt and Road Initiative. This allows China to send hydrocarbons from the Middle East to the coast of Myanmar, across Myanmar into southern China. This allows China to deliver hydrocarbons directly to China without having to go through the Malacca Strait, which the US has openly said they would want to close to restrict Chinese shipping through in the event of some sort of US implemented blockade on Chinese shipping worldwide, or in the middle of some sort of US-Chinese conflict. The article says that this local resistance group called NGF attacked junta troops guarding an off-take station of the China-backed oil and gas pipelines in the Mandalay region. This was the second attack on the facility following one last year, which I talked about in previous videos. The station is located about 5 kilometers to the east of Natgoyi and is guarded by some 20 junta soldiers. This militant group attacked the control center. They said they fired 3 60-millimeter rockets at the control center. They claim they killed 2 soldiers and injured 5 others. And they talk about this is the same station that was damaged when a local resistance group attacked foreign forces guarding the facility in February last year. The oil and gas pipelines, which run from Rakhine Coast to southern China, were constructed in 2011 and began operation in July 2013. The article also talks about how the opposition is openly anti-China, openly anti-Russia, which you would expect from a US-backed opposition. It says, following the visit of the Chinese foreign minister, anti-China protests were staged across the country. Chinese flags were burned. China has attracted public ire for its failure to denounce the coup and for offering support along with Russia for the military regime at the UN. Because again, this is another case of the US backing a violent opposition group attempting to overthrow a government and install a client regime in its place, which is clearly a violation of international law. The US installing client regimes around the world is a blatant violation of international law. So why wouldn't Russia and China oppose that at the UN and offer support for the sovereign institutions of Myanmar? However flawed they may be, they are the sovereign institutions of Myanmar nonetheless. The article continues. It says, anti-China protests erupted across the country in the wake of the putsch, and some resistance groups have threatened to attack Chinese investments in the country. They haven't threatened to do it. They have openly done it. The pipeline twice now, and they burned down Chinese factories at the beginning of the protests. China is a major investor in Myanmar and places great importance on mines, oil and gas pipelines, and infrastructure projects designed to give it access to the Indian Ocean. And they act as if all of China's projects in Myanmar are about helping itself. There's also dams that produce electricity that Myanmar badly needs. They build roads to gain access to these dams and also the communities around them that have no paved roads at all. So they're doing the same thing in Myanmar that I've watched them, China, do in places like Laos, and things that they are doing here in Thailand that are actually spurring real, tangible development. And the United States is determined to stop it and to reverse it. You have to understand that the US goal here is not to present an alternative to Southeast Asia and compete with China in terms of development. Their plan is to counter Chinese-driven development. We can go to articles like this. This is from last year. G7 aims to raise $600 billion to counter China's Belt and Road. Well, we all know that the United States and Europe cannot build infrastructure around the world the way China can. So what are they doing? They're not going to counter it by offering an alternative. They're going to counter it by pumping money into the media to poison people around the world against China. They're also going to use that money to build up opposition groups that will physically attack and destroy Belt and Road Initiative infrastructure, as they have been doing in Myanmar, admittedly. Obviously, the United States, through the Burma Act, authorizing at first non-lethal aid for these armed militants in Myanmar in their pursuit to seize power and get the US client regime back into power, and in the process attacking Chinese infrastructure and investments. This is clearly all unfolding within a much larger proxy war with China itself. And Thailand, by openly committing itself to implement US government legislation regarding Myanmar, to back armed militants in Myanmar attacking Chinese infrastructure, that is this US-backed client regime enlisting Thailand in an anti-China proxy war. And I have to remind people that China is Thailand's largest trade partner, investor, source of tourism, most important infrastructure partner. They're helping build the Thai-Chinese high-speed rail, which is going to connect all of Southeast Asia to China and its massive high-speed rail network all across the nation of China, which would supercharge the economy just as it has supercharged the Chinese economy. They're going to forfeit all of that in pursuit of US foreign policy objectives, which is just to divide, destroy the nations in Southeast Asia, and also cut, destroy, and roll back all cooperation with China. So this is very disturbing. We have to keep a close eye on this. This is an absolute tragedy for Southeast Asia. US meddling up until this point has set the region back years, if not by decades. And with this US-backed client regime coming into power in Thailand, openly vowing to work with the United States to destabilize the region, to fuel armed conflict, it just means years, if not decades more, that Southeast Asia is going to be denied the same sort of development, stability, and prosperity China is enjoying today. So I will keep an eye on this. If you thought this video was useful, please like and share. Think about subscribing. Check the video description below for other places you can find and follow my work. All of the links that I referenced in this video are in the video description below. I've also included several videos about US backing the opposition here in Thailand, and also their backing of the opposition in Myanmar, where I lay out in great detail all of the evidence regarding that. It's just too much information to go over repeatedly when I do updates. That is in the video description below. I've also included the links to the Duran. I know a lot of people expect regular updates from me regarding Ukraine. The Duran, Alex Christoforou and Alexander Mercouris do daily updates on the situation in Ukraine. Everything from on the ground fighting, town to town, to the larger geopolitical context. They do an excellent job. A lot of my coverage of Ukraine simply overlaps with theirs. If nobody is covering what's going on in Southeast Asia, I have an obligation to do that. Even if the videos aren't as popular, it doesn't matter. It's still important. And if you're looking for a good, solid update on Ukraine, I highly recommend the Duran. All of their links will be in the video description as well as ways you can help support my work. I do not monetize my YouTube channel. If an ad pops up, feel free to skip through it. It's not helping me out at all. If you do want to support my work, please do so through Buy Me a Coffee and also Patreon. To everyone who has been helping me out, whether it's a one-time donation or donations month to month, I greatly appreciate that. That is what makes all of this work possible. So again, thank you. And as always, thank you for watching.